What's up, guys? Thanks so much for checking out the channel again today. We are continuing on our Hail Caesar faction review series here, and we have a interesting one, not one that you might immediately think of for the game, since a lot of Hail Caesar focuses on sort of the classic ancient world. So we're going to the Far East here with Han China, and rather than just reading the army list and going through it like normal, a little bit of the background here, just because there are definitely some different troop types that we don't normally see. So kind of picking up in the middle here. Where's that? Light cavalry with crossbows can be treated as bow armed. This type of Chinese crossbow being very light and suitable for horseback. Regular Chinese archers can be armed with bows or crossbows, a weapon that the Chinese perfected and produced in many variants of size and weight. Troops armed with repeating type crossbows, which is a uniquely Chinese weapon, are treated as bow armed in all respects, whilst heavier crossbows can be treated as bows or as crossbows as preferred. The Chariots did go out as far as weapons during the Han Dynasty, and basically by 9 AD no longer a part of the forces. So they're here classed as light chariots. And then the option to field troops as rebel militia allows the army to represent insurrectionist forces. Some of these became established as the personal forces of Han generals toward the end of the dynasty. So this is another one of those sort of massive lists that will also allow for a lot of flexibility in gaming and collecting as well. Prefacing that, though, as far as availability of models and things like that, I don't think Warlord directly makes anything that would really approach suitable minis for that, and I'm honestly, off the top of my head, I cannot think of a manufacturer that would have something that would actually let you represent like ancient Chinese. That being said, if you guys know any, drop it in the comments for us. We would appreciate that. If you're not too familiar with Han China, definitely an interesting period as well. So look at some of the keywords there that they have in the searches, and let's jump in. All right. So infantry, 25% of the army, and again, not counting skirmishers. Cavalry also at least 25%. So you can't go all in infantry or all in cavalry. You're going to have at least a quarter of each there. But that being said, they can still represent a significant amount of the army. Chariots, you can have some. You're not required, but only up to 10%. If you do go that route, you do bring in, or you can bring in some artillery as well. Probably a good idea. And then on the skirmisher, not the skirmisher, the division per unit side, you see the skirmisher breakdown there. Divisions must contain at least 4 units, excluding skirmishers, and must be led by a commander. Southern tribal troops, where present, must form their own division or divisions, which may include skirmishers, as noted below. And then skirmishers per division, 50% of the infantry. So up from some of the more recent armies. So let's jump in. Heavy infantry armed with spears and swords. So typical stat line there for heavy infantry, and they're drilled, and all that clocking in at 29 points. So pretty solid there. And a good just basic core unit that you'll have. We can upgrade them to veterans, so up to half of them, so you get elite for another 3 points. Again, being able to have that in decent quantity depending on the size of your game is just a great thing to have access to. Moreover, extra to incorporate archers into the rear ranks, so basically bringing in a long-range component to that, and really kind of like a multi-function, multi-use unit here. So an extra 2 points, which, if you can spare the 2 points, you got yourself a great fighting unit and a pretty damn decent ranged unit as well. So something to think about for sure. And then also, if you wanted to, you could give the heavy infantry or veterans or veterans long spears, so another upgrade there. So really, if you go all out veteran long spear units with archers in the back ranks, what more do you need in a heavy infantry unit? I mean, that stands up to just about everything that we've looked at so far. It doesn't have some of the other things that maybe like your typical phalanx or pike armed units had, but again, this covers a lot of bases, and in many ways has some more flexibility with that ranged component too. So pretty badass overall to start off with. On the medium side, infantry with spears and swords, also drilled. So basically just a medium profile with drilled as well, 26 points there. And then again, we can kind of take that similar upgrade path. Archers in the rear ranks, why not, for another 2 points. And again, these guys will do solid work. So with that archer component, you can potentially plink off a few wounds from nearby enemies, and then really in that sense kind of punch above your weight, because you're going to hopefully start off without any wounds or fewer wounds against your stamina versus approaching enemy. You could also reduce them basically as impressed convicts or rebel militia, and basically pretty solid discount, but dumps them down to levy, although the stats stay the same, so that's pretty cool. But you could also make them militia fanatics, which would be kind of crazy and could be kind of fun too, just to have hordes of those as well. So definitely some interesting options in the medium side there. So no real major letdown as far as uses and options there. Then we get into light infantry as well. We have light infantry swordsmen. No special rules on them, but a typical light infantry stat line and a normal size unit. So we're not dealing with small units here. You could have one unit basically sort of dual wield, which for 6 points does seem like a major point cost there. But you get several things. So clash and sustain go up by 1. You get elite and tough fighters. Typically, elite and tough fighters are like 3 point per piece upgrades that we've seen. So here you're almost getting the bump up into medium infantry fighting potential. For free then. That being said, though, it is still a light infantry morale save, so just keep that in mind when you're figuring out how and where to apply these units. Alternately, you could give the swordsman double-handed swords, so just one unit. Again, brings that clash up to 6, although the sustain drops to 5, probably just to represent people getting tired of wielding those double-handed swords over a long battle, and they do still get tough fighters with that. So again, could be interesting there just to have a couple of sort of elite-like or light infantry units that will punch above their weight a little bit and could be a nasty surprise for opponents. Then we move into archers, light infantry archers with bows or crossbows. Again, not designed for combat. That being said, rocking 4s across the board there on the combat side. So still a little bit better than some of the other typical light or skirmisher type options where they drop down into the 3s. And you have that fantastic ranged ability, short and long there. And you still have a light infantry morale save, so you're not just soaking wounds. 21 points does seem a bit high, but you gotta have some of that long ranged, or sort of just dedicated long range. But then again, when you can upgrade your heavy and medium infantry into ranged units, that just might be a better option overall and saving the points there. You could bring them down into small unit territory, which might be the better option, but again, still 15 points a pop, and that does also reduce their stats a little bit, of course. Then we get into some of these other funkier units here. So we have Southern Tribal Medium Infantry Warbands with spears and or javelins. So you get that warband clash value of 8. So again, a good old bucket of dice there. Does drop off to a 6. So kind of, again, that medium territory, and all for 24 points. No special rules to speak of or no upgrade paths there. So still could be a useful option, I think. Just... some people might get a little bit too distracted by the fact that they are war bands, and you got to respect the 8 dice. It's not a joke, but that might draw more attention away from the real threat of your list, which so far is at least these heavy and medium infantry that can be kitted out to do all kinds of nastiness. But then again, if they do focus on these guys and ignore the war bands, the war bands can still do work as long as the dice are with you. We also get Southern Tribal Light Infantry Archers as small units, and I think that's probably the better option there compared to the Light Infantry Archers just for the points savings. Again, you're going to just be throwing two at long range, but I think that's just better than spending 21 points on an archer unit, personally. What else? Skirmishers armed with javelins as small units. Again, typical point cost there that we've seen over and over again. Again, really don't want those units in combat. If at all possible, they're not going to last. So then we go to skirmishers with bow or crossbow as small units as well. So again, keep in mind the factors up above. Again, these guys really don't want to be in combat, but again, another relatively cheap, or actually pretty cheap, option there for long range and just to support your main punch so far, which are again those heavy and medium infantry blocks. And then we get into more good stuff. So cavalry. Medium cavalry with spears or javelins. Again, just a bog standard medium cavalry unit clocking in at 27 points. But again, good to have that in quantity. If nothing else, just, good, solid, reliable unit, basically. That can do some work. And again, you do have to have at least 25% of the army in cavalry. So, you can't really go wrong with just some mobile punch here. We get also light cavalry with spears and or javelins. Not sure if that's supposed to be a typo or not, but they do have a clash of 7 here. So pretty interesting. So for 2 fewer points, you get one less clash and a slightly worse morale save. So is it a big enough difference? Potentially. But I guess it just really depends on where you're at with what you're trying to have your cavalry divisions and things like that do. And again, these are just bog standard here, so nothing special about them. When we get to the small cavalry crossbow units, things get a little more interesting. So there's the note up above as to what those count as. Again, we really don't want these guys in combat, but you get really awesome sort of mobile ranged ability here, and feign flight in quantity could be pretty cool. So you're not obligated to take the medium or light cavalry up above, but if you wanted all your cavalry to basically have tons and tons of small units of crossbow dudes here who count as bows, but just imagine having all of your cavalry essentially as like having feign flight. That would be pretty nasty. Also, light cavalry with javelins and bows as small units. So again, slightly different there, but again, just nothing but feign flight. So really, I think that could be the way to go. I probably would, if I were running a bigger list of these guys, definitely bring in some of that medium cavalry just to have more units that can basically throw that awesome like 8 dice at a unit, and at least potentially draw opponents' attention there, and for a while at least stand up to some of their similar type units. But I think here the real sort of trick or treat here is to bring in some combination of these light cavalry shooting units and just have feign flight shenanigans happening all across the board here, and just really annoying and redirecting your opponent, and then sort of finishing up with your infantry blocks, which should by that point devastate units that have accumulated some wounds. So, but wait, there's more. We are not done. We continue on. So we have a little bit more. We have horse archers, like just pure actual horse archers as small units. So again, slightly better clash, I think, than the other ones. But again, this is not about close combat here. But it's a little bit of a different flavor of what we were just talking about. So you also have access to this in quantity, which again, between those 3 units, the two feign flight light cavalry, and then these just pure horse archers, you have access to Parthian shot in quantity. A little bit expensive for the unit there. I forgot to double check when we were talking about that. We saw 21 points apiece here, so that's actually a solid chunk of points. But here, 19 points for Parthian shot in quantity. Again, just I feel like you have to at least take 25% of the army in cavalry. It may well be worth going, like a 50-50 split between infantry and cavalry. But let's take a look before we finish up here and kind of summarize. We do have a chariot unit here. Again, classified as light chariots. It's a 4-horse light chariot, crossbow armed, at least on paper here. Pretty solid, although it's a big chunk of points. But again, another option for throwing 8 dice, and again, it's got the ranged goodness with it too. No special rules, doesn't really need any, but again, just yet another option that you could throw at opponents and annoy them with. And chariots aren't required. You could have up to 10%, so it might be worth sprinkling a couple of them in there. And then let's take a look. We do get light artillery. I think the requirement was 3 units if we wanted to, or up to 3 units. So if you want a little bit more of that extra long range ability, 15 points is not much. Keep these guys towards the back and just fire on things that you either want to weaken down, that you need to weaken down, so some of your opponent's best units, or any units of theirs that might get out of position and potentially threaten like a flank or something of yours. 3 units of these guys, if they're hitting on, if the dice are working for you, they can definitely do work and put those all important wounds on there, and potentially even cause some panic and stuff like that. And then to top it all off, guys, leadership 8 across the board as standard, and your general could be a leadership 9 general. So this is another just powerhouse list. Of course, as we talked about at the beginning, sort of lack of access to models, and just like this type of like Far East list, ancient period, doesn't really get any attention. I can't recall ever seeing minis for like Han China, or so much as like a battle report or anything like that. Not necessarily just for Hail Caesar, but just nothing seems to come to mind for seeing this. That being said, this would be a hell of a fun opportunity to collect something if you can get the minis right. They might not be at 28 mil, which again would be potentially an issue if everything else that you play for Hail Caesar is at 28 mil, which is like the typical scale for it. But again, you can play this at different scales. This could be a real fun list, guys. It's right up there with some of the powerhouses that we've seen. Some of the the Macedonian and successor lists, Persians to an extent, some of the Roman lists that we've seen as well. But really, in many ways, this is it's certainly right up there. But in some ways, with the proper general. And whereas some of those lists didn't have access to Leadership 9, this having this diversity, this quality of troops, and access to special rules in quantity here, all backed up by Leadership 9, can let you be pretty aggressive with some of your orders. And if you're a competent general and can bring this type of combined arms force into play here, you got a nasty little force on your hands here. So again, to review, we have to have at least 25% cavalry and 25% infantry. You have a lot of great stuff in those categories. Chariots aren't required, and neither is artillery. I think with everything else that you have, you certainly don't need the chariots. But again, they could be a fun extra little unit, and just again, maybe even if it's nothing else as a distraction, people a lot of times tend to overly focus on something like a chariot when they should be focusing on your other real threats. So in that sense, they could have their own value there, and at the end of the day, if you get that charge off and stuff, it's going to be still a nasty little bit of damage potentially. And that being said, you still have solid artillery here, which again really makes this list a long-range powerhouse. Between that, the mobile horse archer shenanigans that you can pull with lots of feigned flight and Parthian shot, and then just the solid archers that you have, regular archers. But then also the fact that you can have these combined arms infantry lists where you have ranged ability in your heavy and medium infantry blocks, which is just bananas, really. And then if you still needed some mobile punch, you have just basic, standard, but really decent, just your average medium cavalry unit that can still do work too. So, So I mean, what more can we say about this list? This has a little bit of everything, and is kind of like a real powerhouse. So now again, being a Far East list, there's not really much of a realistic reason to. You can't really recreate historic battles here as far as China versus Rome or something like that. It didn't really happen. But this would definitely be one of those fun, let's play some what if scenarios. You bring some of your best powerhouses of the classical ancient world, and let's see how they stack up against this Han China list. So really, really good stuff. So hope you guys enjoyed our tour through Han China. Let us know in the comments again if you did know of any mini manufacturers for these guys, what's out there, what scales. And then, let us know what you think about the list too. Have you collected this? Have you proxied it? What's your experience been either playing with it or against something like this? Definitely be eager to hear from you guys. Hope you enjoyed again. Leave us a like and a subscribe as well if you haven't, and we will see you in the next one. Thanks for stopping in, guys.